market. In other words, I will sell into the future because there's a very good probability that the prices will start to come down within this year and definitely into 2023. So what I'm saying is that there is hope for lower prices, but we'll have to deal with this interim phase where the market is still trying to adjust and see how can they what is happening in terms of the different international blocks. We now see Russia, India, and India to a certain extent, Russia for sure, forming almost a specific economic bloc that is opposed to the West, the typical West. So that is all of that the market is struggling to sort of figure out what's going to happen there. And then, of course, this whole movement, that I hear, you hear about it on several news stations, weaponized food supply, where they are almost trying to use food to get their way in terms of certain things that they demand from either from the Ukraine or from NATO. So that's a bit of a background. If we look at just a bit of the oil price, the Brent oil price, there you can see the 2008 financial crisis. You can see how the oil price, jumped up there. It started to rise a bit earlier because the market, they always get wind of something and then they start to react. So they reacted a bit earlier, but that was the sort of 2008 financial crisis. I'm not going to go through the whole sort of up and down. Here you can see the market's sort of dropping, but they were starting to realize here there's a COVID or there's a possible pandemic coming, and there the prices start to go up. And then they were a bit there was not so much demand anymore, so the prices started to drop down dramatically to below $25 for Brent per barrel. And then then we see the economy starting to pick up again, starting to go up the prices. And then here we had the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and that's why this huge spike did occur there. This is a graph of a couple of days ago. Obviously, the prices are now a bit lower, but still at very high levels. And we need to remember that the oil price of $100 plus, the biggest producers of oil, Saudi Arabia, I did forget what is there. I think it's about $35. They produce oil. Their cost FOB is $35 per barrel. So they want this price to be much lower than where it is now, because obviously with the tremendously high price, $100 plus or even 90 plus, there's a lot of stimulation of alternative energies being developed. More green energies being developed, cars turned into electric cars, mining equipment starting to use hydrogen, as a fuel. So all of that sort of, they don't like this. So we will see a much lower oil price as soon as these things start to play out and everybody understands what is going on. Obviously, the Russians like this high price currently because they use that to fund their war. And you can see very clearly here, this is the world economy. That is the blue line there. Let's look at the table there. 2021, the world economy grew by 5.7%. The 22 projected figure is half of that. So the whole effect of the Ukrainian war, and this is 90% the Ukrainian war and a bit of aftermath of COVID still. But remember, COVID was there already, so that isn't the big factor. The big factor here is the war on the Ukraine, and that caused the world economy to drop by 50% basically. You can see that for the advanced economies also 5.1%, 2.6%. All of them started to go down by almost 50%, which just indicates to you what is the effect of this war in terms of the world economy. That obviously did come through to the South African economy as well, but we're not doing that bad. If you look at this sort of the 2020 growth, this is the growth in terms of gross domestic product. Okay, that was merely just a jump back from where we were there, so that isn't really so fantastic. We just sort of were gaining back the ground, but there you can see at least 2.7. That wasn't so great. Then we had a bad one. The third quarter of 2021, and I think that was when the oil price started to really, wreak havoc amongst the markets. And then the first quarter of 2022, 1.9%, almost 2%. What is heartwarming is the economy consists of 10 industries, and only 2 of them, mining and construction was negative in terms of the first quarter of 2022. So, manufacturing grew by almost 5%, trade by 4%, so this is not that bad, especially if you picture this against the continuous load shedding, so obviously the businesses, factories and so forth are making plans how to accommodate this and still have some growth in terms of the product that they produce on a quarterly or then on a yearly basis. So this is not that bad, the picture from where I sit. Okay, international food prices. You can see here as the pandemic started to sort of come into play and everybody was getting aware of that, food prices just rocketed. This is the red one there is the aggregate index of the different combined different products, meat, dairy, cereals and sugar. And you can see this thing sort of, just shot up right through the roof. And lately, at the beginning of 2022, we can see the sort of market starting to come down a bit, not in the case of dairy, but some of them, starting to come down a bit, starting to either come down or the momentum going up starting to reduce. So that was a positive picture, but still at very high prices. If you let's look at, for example, meat. Sitting there, this is a 6-year high, 7, 10, more than 6-year high, a 10-year high in terms of, where the current index sits for meat in terms of world prices. So that was the effect there. If we play this back into South Africa, this is the international commodity market of dairy, butter, skimmed milk powder, cheddar, and full cream milk powder. And you can see there very much the same sort of thing that happened in 2020. They starting to go up. That was part of the COVID story. Then we had some further momentum going up in terms of that was the Ukraine story when Russia did attack the Ukraine, and then that war is still having certain effects, but it's starting to turn down a bit. It's coming down into a bit lower price levels, but still at record levels. The red there is butter. Butter is a record level in terms of international prices. So is cheddar, all of them, the powders, skimmed and full cream milk powder, not at the record levels, but still at very high levels compared to what the levels were here in the middle of between 2010 and 2020. If we bring in the rand situation, you will see there that it is actually a bit more pronounced. The prices are even at higher levels. And that is due to the fact that the rand is obviously depreciating against most of the other currencies. So what we can say here is that these prices are at extremely high levels, which make it very difficult to import, and import is already expensive. But not only that, we still have some congestion at the harbors, and it doesn't seem that is going to get better any soon. So there's and this also is obviously an indication for a country, the importance of being so self-sufficient in, for example, dairy production, from the unprocessed milk right through to the processor, to the retailer, and then to the consumer. The ability and the benefit and the asset the country has when they are self-sufficient for the main food substances is just, absolutely, again, accentuated by what has happened during COVID, and I'm sure that most governments, and the South African one for sure, did take heed of this, the importance of being self-sufficient when these sort of tough times come. And if I think I read a couple of books, and the opinion of those books indicated that they think that pandemics will become more frequent. And that is merely due to the fact that people travel so much, and the world economy is getting so much, more open to tourism and conferences being held across borders and so forth. They predict that pandemic sort of, issues will become more prevalent than what it has been in the past. If there's any questions, please stop me, or comments. You're welcome with that. This is the Global Dairy Trade Index. It's an auction that takes place every second week. It is a web-based auction, and people across the world can enter bids and offers onto that market, and that's how this price is then created. It is your typical dairy products, the 4 that I just now covered, and a couple of other products as well. That is a combination of those products into this index. You can see there that here at the beginning of 2022, the prices start to sort of saturate and start to come down again. But again, you can see there's a sort of a typical level was between the 1,000 and 1,100 index level, and we're still far above that. And that just sort of, substantiate the previous graph that prices are definitely coming down, but they are still at a very high level in terms of, in terms of rands, even at the more pronounced level. That's the story of dairy. Let's move to South Africa. South Africa, there we can see this is the unprocessed milk production or purchases. We refer to it as milk production. This is what farmers produce on a monthly basis. You can see we are fairly behind. These bar graphs are the ones for 2022. We just now did receive the figure for June. June is just 3.5% less than in June 2021. And on a whole, on a cumulative basis, we are 1.6% below the production that we had for the first 6 months in 2021. So this is a bit disturbing. And we are worried about that, and I'll cover a bit later, why we see this basically happening. And here it is. You see, this is one of the most important sort of graphs that drives, let's call it production behavior. Now, just as a sort of a quick, back glance, back, the definition of an economy of economics is the study of human behavior. That is what it is all about. How does humans behave in terms of certain changes in their environment, and this obviously influences how a farmer will change if the price is at a certain level versus the cost at a different level. Now, we all know that in terms of dairy or the unprocessed milk production, your feed cost is the highest percentage in terms of your total cost, and that's why we use this to figure out what is people doing or how is people experiencing the current different factors in the market, and currently we would like to see this ratio. This is a milk price ratio to the feed price ratio. We would like to see this ratio at around about 1.3 at least, preferably 1.4, but 1.3 at least, and we're far below that. And that is the exact reason why we are seeing that we are so falling behind production in terms of 2021 versus 2022. It is basically two things. Our price for unprocessed milk did not react nearly enough in terms of how cost rises. Costs did increase a lot. Fertilizers are up more than 100%. You know for yourself what happens with diesel, with electricity, and so we can go on. So the cost side, and then obviously grain as well. Grain, both soyas and maize are I don't have the percentages offhand now, but they are more than 50% more expensive than some time ago. And all of that added up to this situation where we are now, that farmers are struggling to produce. Not that they don't want to produce, but it is difficult to produce when you are producing at a loss constantly. And of course, farmers are in a very precarious situation. They are to a large extent the ultimate price takers. The cows produce everyday milk. This milk's got to get, it's got to be maintained within the cold chain. It's got to get off the farm to the processor. And this happens, tomorrow again, and the day after again, So to that extent, they are very much with their back against the wall, which makes it very difficult for them to at all, influence price, even though they are currently, producing at a negative or unprofitable level. Just to compare a bit, this is the solid lines. There is the average European price for unprocessed milk, in other words, the farmer price. There at 48.52 euros per 100 kilograms. We are in South Africa. We are R1.76 below that price. So you can just imagine. We're sitting on about R6.48 is the average price. So we are, in that sense, almost 30%, if you take it as a percentage of our current price, below the European average price. The dotted line there, that is the New Zealand price. If you just look at the one in the light blue color, that is for 2022, there we are R1 below New Zealand in terms of that same price per 100 kilograms. And New Zealand is one of the lowest cost producers in the world. South Africa is in the same sort of, at the same sort of level, but they are also a major exporter. And in that sense, they are very much a picture of what's happening on the international markets. So the fact that they are at that price level and we are a rand below that just indicate to you that we are probably the lowest, or South Africa has the lowest paid dairy farmers in the world. This goes back to the economic situation. South African economy doing not too bad, I would say, under the circumstances. But nevertheless, you can see here, this is the retail quantities being sold of the different dairy products, fresh milk right down to cream. And if you look at the 12 months compared to 12 months before, that is that period over there, a lot of negatives, fresh milk going down in terms of sales volumes by almost 7%, UHT milk going down by almost 3%. So all of this is a fairly negative picture. And that is something that we are obviously worried about to a great extent. There is something like a marketing mix. Marketing mix refers to a couple of things within the marketing environment, and I think we should be man enough or person enough to say maybe there's something that one can tweak a bit regarding the marketing mix to see if we can get these sales to a better level. Make no mistake, although the South African consumer is at odds regarding price increases across a wide range of foodstuffs and other administered prices, the petrol price, diesel price, electricity price, and so forth. They are the part of the consumer matrix that is sort of really buying dairy is at a level that is not so much influenced in terms of these different higher prices. If you look at the living standard measurement sort of indication, you'll see there that the South African population is growing faster towards the higher LSM levels. The latest one they use, SEM, is a socio-economic measurement. There also you can see that same movement occurring. So I'm not so convinced that one can merely say because the South African consumer is under pressure, we need to understand that the demand for dairy is down. I think that is just too simplistic. We need to sort of think about that a bit differently and see what we can get out of that. The prices of the different dairy products, average retail price. Let's look at the 12 months one. All of them were increasing with less than inflation. Most of them, 1, 2, 3. 3 of them increased with more than the inflation rate. Most of them increased with less than inflation, which is also a positive thing. That at least to that one can see that retailers are trying to approach the market in such a way that we can still see some good dairy sales. I think as a closing remark, with this level of uncertainty, and make no mistake, there's still a lot of uncertainty, going on. You can just look at the oil price. It is sort of still unsure where to go, and oil, as the biggest sort of factor regarding energy, is driving a lot of economic wheels, and that is a very important one to look at. But what I'm saying is that in this time of uncertainty, I think communication within the dairy value chain is paramount, and we need to do that with very clear words and in real time as far as possible. Elena, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bertus. If there's any questions, can you please raise your hand through the icon, and you can put your questions in the chat bar as well. Okay, Bertus, there's one question. From Zolili Soka. Zolili, you can continue.
Hi, Bertus. First of all, thank you for having this program. I wanted to know, in terms of the challenges for farmers, for maybe smaller scale farmers, do you think a way to combat the high input costs now for people with maybe smaller herds is to maybe get into processing, since the processing, the fresh milk prices also haven't gone up according to the high input prices as well. I don't know if you could maybe elaborate on that.
Thanks, Zolini. I hope I got your name right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you for that question. That's an interesting point that you raise. You know, there is always space for what one can refer to as niche markets, you know. And, you know, between the managing director of the MPO and myself, we often discuss, you know, why are we not getting into the, let's call it the more informal market in terms of, you know, dairy consumption. And that will typically be available to a person that's got a smaller herd and that is producing for a niche market in a specific area. You know, it is difficult for, you know, you've got these big chains in terms of your tertiary industry, but there must be space in the rural areas where you can produce milk and even, you know, some of the you know, easy to manufacture processed dairy products to be able to, you know, to provide that to the local community or even a wider community at better prices in a niche basis. But obviously, I've got to add to that, you've got to have some competitive advantage. You've got to either have a you know, a good climate where you can obtain, you know, low cost fodder, for example, maybe grow it yourself. That is one of the tricks with most industries. You must have some competitive advantage to enable you to at least, you know, produce at such a level that you can allow for maybe lower prices from the consumer, but still be able to make a profit within your niche market. So I say yes, I would support that. The ability for niche markets to be developed and for your competitive advantage to define what is your competitive advantage. That's always in play. We don't have to wait for, you know, difficult circumstances. Those two are always in play. It is merely the entrepreneur that one needs to you know, to get going and start to think around that. And make no mistake, you know, the different production factors that we do have. And the fourth one is entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is one of the scarcest, you know, production factors in the world and in South Africa as well. So if we can get some entrepreneurs interested in that could definitely work. Thank you, Zolini.
Thank you for that.
Elena? Okay, I can't.
Sorry, I was muted. There's another person, Alex Jenkins. He can also continue with his question. Sorry.
Morning, Bertus. Thank you very much for the insightful talk.
Hello, Alex.
Bertus, you finished off your talk saying communication up and down the value chain is key at this point, and it's something that many farmers are talking about. You know, how the value of dairy products actually increases from the farm to the supermarket shelf. I guess that's a very long, complicated discussion to have about how we open up those channels so that everyone can understand what a fair margin is and how dairy products might be impacted by it might impact the final product. But just a direct question from your opinion and from the MPO's point of view, are we predicting any price movements in milk in the near future? I know with our seasonal calving coming into full effect, we usually see price decreases, which is really not going to help the situation on farm. Have you got a crystal ball that you can peer into and give any comment?
Thanks, Alex. We are aware of already one fairly big processor that is reducing their yeast price by the end of their price by the end of this month. So that's about 40 cents. I think they're going to drop. They refer to it as a winter premium that they're just now pulling back. So yes. They don't see it as a real price decrease, but it is actually a price decrease. I'm not sure even how winter premiums is possible to still come into play in the circumstances like we have today. I mean, everybody is aware of the fact that we are in abnormal times regarding cost price increases. And I know it's not only for the farmer. I mean, obviously the secondary industry do have some of that as well, and obviously the retailers as well. So there's, and I think that's where the communication thing comes in, and I think that's where trust will have to be, renegotiated, if one can put it like that. If the farmers are not making money and they're going to reduce the price by 40 cents, then you will see, even just more, even a further reduction regarding what is going on the production side. Luckily, I also know of a company that's going to increase their prices by, I think, 10 cents and then later again 10 cents. So there's a different movement within the market at this stage. But if I must put out my neck, I would say that sanity will prevail, and we won't see price decreases, on a wide scale, and we will see some price increases in the next couple of weeks, because it is merely a fact of the matter that we are currently not producing enough milk. I said we were just on 1.6% below unprocessed milk supply compared to the first 6 months of 2021. If you compare that to a bit longer, you'll get to 4.4%, and then you don't allow for any growth in terms of your product being consumed by more consumers. Now I've referred to the LSM, sort of measurement, and then the SEM measurement as well, and all of those indicates that there should have been growth in some of your, let's call it, higher value products. That is your protein type of products. Typically, as the consumers move up those different measurements, they get into eating more protein. And just on the back of that, we've got to say that we are probably 7-8% below what is demanded from the consumer side. If we've got a marketing mix right, just as a sort of side comment, in 2020, there, SARS, South African Revenue Services, made a little, note, and they said that there were 60,000 more millionaires that came into their sort of fold in 2020, and 485,000 more taxpayers. Now, all of that needs to indicate to you to a certain extent that these people were before outside the sort of tax bracket, and they're now falling into that tax bracket, and they will typically be the people that is moving up according to your LSM measurements and your socioeconomic measurements. So let me just say that I don't think we'll see a wide scale, of a reduction in prices. I think we will rather see prices sort of, going up a bit, not seriously, but certainly, noteworthy increases within the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Bertus.
Any other question for Bertus?